If you've ever spent any time picking out perennials, trees, or shrubs, you've probably came across the term hardness zone. But what does that actually mean? And why should it matter when planning your garden? Let's break it down. Welcome to the Garden Gamble, where we're planting hope, taking chances, and growing memories for every season. I'm Ricky Clausen, owner of Clausen's Greenhouse in northern Minnesota. This podcast is for anyone who's ever stood in the garden, greenhouse, or backyard wondering if they're doing it right. Here we talk real-life gardening, the wins, the mistakes, and everything we learn along the way. Whether you're new to plants or have dirt permanently under your nails, you're in the right place. Let's take the gamble and grow together. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Garden Gamble. This is Ricky Clausen here at Clausen's Greenhouse, and last week we talked quite a bit about garden planning, where we had talked about reverse garden planning and broke it down into how to plan if you were a vegetable gardener, a cut flower grower, and perennials. And today I kind of wanted to dive a little bit further into the perennial side of garden planning, specifically talking about hardiness zones. Like I mentioned, you might have came across that term before if you've ever looked at perennials or trees, or if you were starting your garden plans after last week's episode. You've probably seen terms like zone 4, zone 3, and you might be wondering, what does that even mean? Why is it relevant to my garden? We've had quite a few customers here at the greenhouse in past seasons too, when I'm trying to explain different perennials to them, and I say terms like, oh, this is zone 3, or this one is good for zone 4, and they kind of look at me with like a blank stare, and they're like, I don't know what those numbers mean. They look at me like I'm talking gibberish. So I thought this would be a good time to kind of break that down a little bit and explain it and go through it in more detail. So then when it comes time to pick out plants for your gardens this year, you're a little bit more prepared and have a little bit more of an understanding of what those terms mean in your garden and in the gardening world. Okay, so what is a hardiness zone? Hardiness zones are part of a system that were developed by the USDA, or the United States Department of Agriculture, to help gardeners and growers understand which plants can survive the winter in their region. So the zones are based on an average annual minimum winter temperature, or in other words, how cold it gets in your area during the winter. And that data is collected and updated every 30 years. So it's a long stretch between when those new hardness zones come out. And the latest hardness zone actually just came out in 2023. So it's actually been fairly recently updated in terms of hardness zones. And there were some changes. So this is based on a 30-year average. And one thing to kind of keep in mind as we kind of go through the podcast today in this episode, it's based on every 30 years. So you're going to have some outlier years. Like last year, we had a lot of customers come in and say that, oh, my perennial didn't come back this spring. Like, I've had it for 15 years and now it suddenly died. Well, you definitely weren't alone if that happened to you last year. Here in northern Minnesota, we didn't get a lot of snow coverage. We didn't get a lot of snowfall last year, and we had some fairly extreme cold snaps. So without that insulation from the snow, plus the extra cold, some of those perennials that have been sitting just fine for a number of years didn't make it. So that's one thing to keep in mind with these hardness zones is, yeah, it might have been rated for the zone that you're in, but when you have extremes like that, you still might not have plants that survive. And I guess that's kind of part of gardening. You win some, you lose some. Kind of stinks, but it does happen. So like I said, you're not alone if that happened to you. All right. In the USDA plant hardness zones on the map, it divides the United States into 13 zones. with zone 1 being the coldest and zone 13 being the warmest. Each zone represents a 10-degree difference in average minimum temperature, and then it's further split into an A and B section to refine it even more. And when you go to the website, the USDA website for hardiness zones, it does kind of explain those exact temperature differences on the map that I'll talk about again here in a little bit. But I also wanted to kind of talk about this today because you'll hear me often in the podcast say, oh, I'm Ricky from northern Minnesota. And you might be wondering, like, why is that relevant? Because just in Minnesota alone, there is a number of different hardness zones. So if you're a southern Minnesota grower versus me up here in the north, our gardens and what we can plant may vary by a lot. There maybe isn't a lot of plants that I can grow that someone down in southern Minnesota can. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you hear me say that a few times throughout the podcast going forward too, hopefully this kind of helps you understand why that matters and why I say it that way. So here at Clausen's Greenhouse, we are just outside of Holt, Minnesota, just north of Thief River Falls in Marshall County. And we are in zone 3B is our hardness zone here, where Pennington County and in Thief River Falls, which is just like 12 miles south of us, is now in zone 4A. You're drawing a line in the sand there, but is there really that much temperature swing 12 miles from us? Probably not, but on that 30-year average, that's where they kind of found that difference, and that's where they put that line on the map. So something to keep in mind too. Why do hardness zones matter, and why knowing your zone can help you? Of course, it helps you choose plants that are going to survive and thrive in your climate. So you can pick out plants in zone 3, where if you're technically in zone 4 but plant a zone 3 perennial, the chances of that surviving kind of goes up. But like I said, there are outlier years. You can certainly plant zone 4 perennials. They might make it, they might not. But let's keep going. Another reason why hardness zones matter is to avoid wasting money on plants that aren't winter hardy in your area. Now, here at Clausen's Greenhouse, we try to just have perennials that are good for our zone and the surrounding zone. So we only carry zones 2, 3, and just a little bit of zone 4. We're not going to carry zone 5 because people that are coming to our greenhouse, if they buy a zone 5 plant, the chances of that surviving the winter are very slim. And we really want you to be successful. We don't want you to waste your money on a plant that's only going to be good for one season when you think it's going to last for years and years to come. You can keep that in mind too if you're shopping at a garden center or a greenhouse. Not us. Make sure you look at that tag and know the hardness zone for the plant that you're picking up. Make sure that you aren't wasting your money. All right. Another reason why hardness zones matter is time your planting both better in spring and fall. For example, if a hardy to zone 5 and you live in zone 3, that plant might not make it through the winter unless it's treated like an annual or you can protect it. What that means there is you can buy those plants. Oftentimes perennials are more expensive because you're getting a longer longevity out of that plant, hopefully, so you can enjoy it for multiple years. But you can buy perennials not in your zone and treat them like an annual. But personally, I think that's a waste of money. You certainly can, but it's not for me and not what I personally would do. You also can protect them by adding extra layers of mulch and leaves, extra snow coverage. There's a few things that you can do if you're really have your heart set on a certain perennial. Let's talk about Minnesota hardness zones. So Minnesota falls primarily in zones 3A to 4B, with the northernmost parts, kind of like where I am, being in the coldest zones. So Zone 3A and 3B is us here in northern Minnesota, including areas like International Falls, Roseau, Greenbush, and right here in Holt, our tiny town of Holt. And then zones 4A and 4B is most of like central and southern Minnesota, including Brainerd, St. Cloud, the Twin Cities, Rochester, and even Canby, Minnesota, which is my hometown. I grew up in southern Minnesota, and now I'm a northerner. My friends actually love to joke that I'm the Canadian of the group. We're way up there. We are semi close to the Canadian border, where I'm from. It's close enough to call me a Canadian, so they like to kind of poke fun at me for that. All right, but even within a zone, there are microclimates that can make a big difference. So, like your backyard might be warmer or cooler than the surrounding areas due to wind protection, different sunlight, or nearby structures. You might have a neighbor that's had great success with a perennial, and you have that same perennial and it didn't work out. That's where like those microclimates kind of come into play. Like, where did you plant it versus where your neighbor planted it? So sometimes that can make a huge difference too. And keep that in mind if you pick up a perennial that you know is maybe not going to survive the winter. Plant it in a more protected area. You might have more success that way. All right, so if you are not sure where your zone is, the USDA has a very easy to use interactive map that allows you to type in your zip code and find your zone instantly. If you go to the USDA.gov, they have the map there, or I do have the link to their website on our website at claussensgreenhouse.com. You can actually find this episode in blog form on the website. So if you go to claussensgreenhouse.com, go to the blog section, and you'll see a blog titled Understanding Hardiness Zones and what they mean for your garden. And if you go through that, we've kind of talked a lot about what's at the top of that page, but there is a button that you can click that takes you right to that interactive map. And then also on our blog page, since we are here in Minnesota, I did include the map of Minnesota and what that looks like. So you can check that out at claussensgreenhouse.com on the blog section. So planting with zones in mind. So when you're shopping for plants, always check the tag or the description for its cold hardiness. At our greenhouse, we're careful to select varieties proven to perform in zones 3 and 4 so you can plant with confidence and take that gamble out of gardening. If you're not sure what to choose, we're definitely here to help find hardy, beautiful plants that will come back year after year in your Minnesota garden. Or you can check out your own local greenhouse or garden center. I'm sure they would be happy to help point you in the right direction and make a great selection. If you're wanting a little bit more help or are redoing your landscape, you can also reach out to us for our landscaping needs. Cade does the landscaping side, and we both know a lot about which plants will be successful in your gardens and landscapes. So if you want us to come plant it for you, if you want us to do a full landscape design based on plants that will be good for where you are, in your zone, in your yard, we can certainly help you out with that. We do have a landscaping tab on our website too, so that's just claussensgreenhouse.com/landscaping. And we do have an inquiry form there that you can fill out to give us a better idea of what you had in mind for your project. All right, so your garden starts with the right plants. Understanding your hardiness zone is the first step to long-term gardening success. Whether you're planting perennials, trees, shrubs, or even just experimenting with some tender varieties, knowing your zone is going to help you make smart choices that thrive in our northern climate here in Minnesota. Stop by the greenhouse, reach out anytime. We're happy to answer any questions and help you plan a garden that works with the seasons, not against them. Thank you so much for listening. to the Garden Gamble and this week's episode. We will see you back here next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me on the Garden Gamble. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with a fellow plant lover. Gardening isn't a gamble when you have the right guidance, and you don't have to figure it out alone. Until next time, take care.